Hello, everyone. Oh, come on now. Have you all had a great week? All right. So I certainly want to welcome you all to our final plenary. It's been a great week, certainly an energizing one. And one of the things we wanted to make sure with closing out, again, our biggest, our boldest, and most exciting conference is that we focus on our future. We have a wonderful panel that's coming that's focused on building a future-proof CDFI workforce. And for us, making sure that to match the recognition, to match the awards, to match the growth of the industry and the trajectory that we're on, that we're not just focused on bringing in new talent, but that we're building the pathways for the future talent. That was an applause. Someone started to, I just wanted to pause for a minute. We know what's possible when capital meets purpose. Now we need to position our industry as a place where career meets purpose. So I'm excited. We have a friend and a champion of our work who is here to moderate the panel. Brandee and McHale will be leading this discussion, a very important one. Brandee is the head of community investing and development at Citi and president of the Citi Foundation. She also serves on the board of directors of OFN member LISC. Brandee has dedicated her career to initiatives that connect low-income communities and communities of color to jobs, housing, a more economically secure future. Please welcome to the stage our friend, Brandee McHale.
Thank you so much. Okay. Hello, OFN. It's so great to be here, to see everybody. I know that it's been a really jam-packed few days, but we're gonna go strong as we come into the home stretch here. I am joined by two guests today, and I'll introduce them in a moment, but I really want to emphasize guests because what I was most excited about in having the chance to participate in this session is that we're really gonna have a dialogue with leaders who share our common interests, and we all are driving towards the same goal line, finish line, North Star, but come from a slightly different sector. So I'm going to try to not use acronyms. Hopefully, we're very acronym heavy here in the CDFI space. As long as you know what that acronym is, I think you're okay. We'll go from there. So talent, human capital, just so incredibly important. My own personal editorial, big ideas, big things. The money really does matter, I get it, but none of it happens without energized, creative, persistent, talented individuals who know how to both problem solve and collaborate with others. And so we're going to talk about that today. CDFIs, we are in the job creation business. We lend to create jobs for others. But look at the size of this room and the number of institutions that we represent. CDFIs are also employers themselves. They don't just enable others to create jobs, but we are a sector and an industry that employs others. It's time for us to think about our human capital strategies, and not just for the benefit of our own institutions, but to also, I'd like to think the way we've thought about financial capital and merging mission and margin, we should think about human capital in the same way. It'll both support our mission, but also helps to support our financial bottom line as well. So, yeah, okay. But the really interesting part of this for me is that this is not an absolute. I know that there are exceptions to what I'm about to say, but typically, having the opportunity to be on the grant-making side, you meet a lot of organizations. And inevitably, in the conversation, I will usually ask, so how did you get into this field? How did you get into this space? And typically, in the CDFI sector, I hear two primary responses. One, it was a total accident. I had no idea I was going to be here. Or two, I was a banker and I'm trying to reinvent my life now. So, I think we need to add a third leg to that stool and really be intentional and say, I was a young adult and I was recruited into this field because I wanted to marry my desire to both catalyze positive social impact, but to do it in a way that was sustainable. So we're gonna. Okay, so who are our guests today? Let me introduce them to you. Our first panelist is Byron Auguste. Byron is the CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Opportunity at Work, this is an organization that is really looking to rewire the US labor market to enable 70 million Americans who are skilled through alternative routes. STARS. You're teaching us an acronym from your field, and we'll come back to talk about what STARS are, and really with the goal to help more Americans achieve upward mobility through the job market. Under Byron's leadership, Opportunity at Work is behind a national campaign called Tear the Paper Ceiling, a public information campaign with the Ad Council to remove the invisible barrier of a 4-year degree, and to help employers understand that talent exists in many places. It's our job as employers to really, I think, expand and broaden our horizons for the ways that we recruit that talent and support, not just get talent in the door, but support that talent to succeed. Since starting this work, 16 states and many, many companies I know have been engaged with the Opportunity at Work organization have actually removed bachelor's degrees as a requirement for hiring. Systemic change at work. So thank you for that. And both of our panelists, Byron, have worked in the public policy space because we know that to do this work effectively, we've got to work across sectors and systems. Before launching Opportunity at Work, Byron served for 2 years in the White House as a deputy assistant to the President for Economic Policy and Deputy Director of the National Economic Council. So thank you, Byron, and welcome. We appreciate you being with us here today. Luminary in the field of workforce development, joined by another luminary, our colleague and our guest and our new friend, Maria Flynn. Maria is the CEO and president of Jobs for the Future, which is a national organization focused on transformation in the American workforce and education systems. Jobs for the Future is guided by a commitment to equitable economic advancement for all. Sounds very familiar to us, Maria. Again, we share the same goal, but different tactics for getting there. Maria really is a national authority on this work, and in particular, really looking at the role of technology in the labor market and employer engagement. Before joining Jobs for the Future, Maria also served in the public sector. She was a member of the federal government's Senior Executive Service in the Department of Labor, Employment, and Training Administration. I think there are more words there than in the U.S. Treasury Community Development Financial Institutions Program. So we get it. But there she oversaw the development of policies for training programs and supervised the agency's research and evaluation strategy, which is an important piece for us to not just focus on doing more, but doing the things that matter most. So bringing light and really using data to understand that. So welcome, Maria. We're very happy to have you here. Okay, yeah. All right, so let's go back. Tell me about stars. Tell us about stars. And why don't we, if you can help us set the stage with sort of the big picture, what's happening overall in labor force trends and what you're seeing.
Right. So stars is skilled through alternative routes. And that means not alternative people, not alternative skills, but alternative routes. Stars have valuable skills for work, and they got there in a different way, or they didn't go through the specific the hurdle of a bachelor's degree. And we can say more about that because there's a lot to say about it. But to bring it back to really understand why stars have skills for the jobs that need to be done in your institutions and in your communities, I want to put it back to the audience for a second and just think about your own path. So if you think about the value you add in your work today, I want two hand raises. The first would be for those for whom the value you add today comes mainly from what you learned in school, right? And then the second group is the value that you add today comes mainly from what you learned on the job. Got it? I'm sure there's a bit of each. So first is the value, in school, you gained most of your skills that you use today in school. Please raise your hand. You have a little time, do you want to, anyone else? Okay, so, and then how about those for whom the value you add today are mostly the skills you learned on the job? Okay, that seems like a lot of hands. And here's the thing, maybe most people here, I don't know, maybe most people here have bachelor's degrees, but whether you do or whether you don't, that answer is the same. Most people learn their skills on the job, all right? So talent is equally distributed. Skills need to be cultivated, they need to be developed. They can be developed in formal education environments, but they absolutely are developed in military service, in all sorts of jobs. And I think where Opportunity at Work started is to say, so there's something that I think we need to be a little bit against, and then something I think we need to be for. What we need to be against is this creeping notion that some people are talent and some people are not, right? That some people have, that is just not true. And then in terms of skills, what we see, 70 million stars, these are people who have a high school degree or equivalent, they're attached to the workforce, and so they have skills from the jobs they've done. Opportunity at Work has built a very large data set of 140 million job transitions, of the skills distance from every job to every other job. And at top line, we can tell you that 30 million stars have skills today for jobs that pay more than 50% more than the jobs they're in. The overlap between the skill sets for low wage jobs and middle wage jobs is often very high. Low wage is not low skill. And we have the receipts to prove that. We have the data, so you can believe the data, or you can believe your own eyes. If you think about what we all saw in they want, and there are millions of people in every region, urban, rural, every race, that are stars that have those skills. So that's the most foundational thing I want to say. And I'll pass it over to Maria, but if you take every question we have on the rest of this panel through the lens that there are tens of millions of people with skills to do work that needs doing and who are being screened out, then our answers can be very different, both for CDFIs and for the communities you serve.
Perfect, thank you. So, Maria, I know that your organization, and I'm actually quite familiar, have worked with Jobs for the Future many, many years ago, but we've watched your work, and one of the things that struck me was a few months ago, Jobs for the Future came out with a very bold plan. Mm-hmm. And in this moment where things feel very, very difficult and divisive, the fact that you came out with this very audacious goal I thought was terrific. So tell us a little bit about the work that your organization is doing and this goal.
Great. Hi, everybody. It's really terrific to be here. I was very excited to accept the invitation because I truly think that the CDFI community is really at a moment of great opportunity. And so I'm looking forward to digging in today. As for JFF, as Brandee said, in June of this year, we rolled out a new North Star that is guiding our work, and we hope will be something that really the whole ecosystem, including CDFIs, can join in with us on. And it is that in 10 years, we want to see 75 million US workers who face systemic barriers to advancement working in quality jobs. So it's a big number and a big goal, and certainly not one that we're going to tackle ourselves. How we came up with that, very briefly, is we're really looking at 4 big populations of workers within that goal. One is almost all women, almost all people of color, anyone who does not have a 4-year college degree, so very aligned with the work around STARS, and then finally anyone who has been impacted by the justice system. And if you look at the number of workers across those categories who are currently working in quality jobs, the number is about 38 million out of a total of 130 million workers who kind of fall into that category. So we're saying let's work together to double that number. So really taking that from 38 million, ideally to 75 over the next decade.
That's fantastic. But help us understand, I heard you use this term quality jobs. Let's double click on that.
Sure.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And like all of you, we've done a lot of work thinking about JFF as an employer and an employer in the nonprofit space. And so these 4 categories that I'll outline are things that we're very much looking internally about this as well. So the first is compensation. So I think that's a given and the first thing everyone thinks about when you think about a good job. I think particularly for this audience, I think it's realizing that a lot of times nonprofits, we're not going to be able to compete on compensation alone, right? But I think in terms of looking at a quality job, making sure that salary and benefits are there and are providing a living or ideally a thriving wage is key. The second category is really around agency and belonging. And particularly as we're starting, all of us starting to look at how do we recruit young people into our organizations, how do we really engage Gen Z? We know that things like belonging are really at the top of their list when they're looking at employers. The third is structure, right? We hear about this a lot, particularly in the retail sector, but I think across the board, making sure that there is good kind of structure and assurance and stability within the job context. And then the last is advancement. So making sure that there are advancement opportunities, both I think within the organization that the person's working in, but I think something that we can maybe talk more about today is also that internal advancement and also advancement to other organizations within the sector or within an adjacent sector, and for employers really to be embracing that up front when they're thinking about their talent strategies.
So, both of you are doing this work, and you are also nonprofit organizations, and you have external funders, and you have the pressures of both running programs, trying to influence policy, be spokespeople. I know that time is probably one of our scarcest commodities. So if you're speaking, giving advice to other colleagues in the nonprofit space, what's your advice to organizations about thinking about talent? And I'm really mindful of this idea that we have to be intentional about recruiting, but also supporting the talent that we're recruiting and helping them to move up the ladder.
Well, I think in the nonprofit sector, particularly for those of us working on economic opportunity, I think it's really incumbent on us to think hard about this, because the example we set is important. And in some parts, the kind of Washington, D.C. area, for example, where we are, the nonprofit sector is a very meaningful part of employment. And that's true in a number of places. So if there's not inclusivity of access in the nonprofit sector, it's a real problem. But I think to me, the best way to get at inclusivity is through thinking skills first, because there are a lot of ways people can gain skills, and gaining skills is learning. If you can get a better job based on your skills, like everybody can do that. But if the first barrier is the pedigree someone has, right? The acquisition of a marker that takes, whatever, $80,000, $100,000 and a lot of time and maybe some generational wealth, that's a huge problem for our whole society and for the sector. So my advice is, first of all, you should have a STARS talent strategy, whatever is relevant to you. There's a very diverse workforce, but half of the skilled workforce in this country are STARS. And if you don't have a STARS talent strategy, I would say you don't have a talent strategy. You have half a talent strategy. There are, in the public sector, for example, Brandee mentioned that 16 states, or 17 now, actually have adopted this approach. The first we worked with is Maryland, when Governor Larry Hogan was there, and the current administration is building on it. But when we first announced that, when I was there with Governor Hogan, and he talked about the 1.3 million STARS in Maryland and the problems we need to solve for the state of Maryland. The public sector has some of the biggest job openings, the biggest labor shortages of any sector in the country. Work is solving problems, and their STARS are problem solvers. And going at it that way, rather than talking about just inclusion, no, we want people who can do this work, and we need it, in fact. And there was a 400% surge in applications from STARS, and a lot of jobs, there are a lot of skilled people everywhere. And from the standpoint of equity, too, it is definitely disproportionately Black and Latino workers who have skills but don't have the degrees. You have a lot of people who have a lot of college experience but didn't get all the way there because their job commitments conflicted with their work. It's really amazing to me, the narrative around skills gap, when by far the biggest portion of the skills gap that's perceived could be addressed this way. But it's real work, so I don't want to, and I believe that some of the ways you could do this most effectively is, first of all, doing it as an industry, because most CDFIs are relatively small, and so if you do it as a cohort in the industry, if you learn together, if you share that knowledge, it's really valuable. Number two, do it with data, and if you're interested, Opportunity at Work has, actually there's a stellar site.org, we put our data in a form that you can go look at it. And if you want to work as a cohort, you can look at that. But actually, where are the skills that you're missing in a granular way, in your geographies, et cetera? And I would then say for CDFIs, you have such an opportunity to do it not just for yourselves, although you absolutely should do it for yourselves, but to be part of regional and be part of local coalitions that are doing that. Because you might not have that many jobs to fill, and so a lot of people might show up, you're not going to hire all of them. But if you have more employers, more community-based employers, it's just so powerful. And I believe that, and the final thing I'll say is, if you do it in roles that you have a lot of, that's particularly good, because then you can bring cohorts, you can build, understanding about how to develop people, and that I would strongly advise. So I think there's ways to do it, but I don't want to mince words. I mean, it's a real effort, but we put a real effort into a lot of things that matter for our organizations, and this has got to be, I think, right near the top.
Yeah, I think to pick up that, on that idea that it's hard, I'll give an example from JFF. So we removed our degree requirements from all of our roles a few years ago, and Byron may not remember this, but probably back then, 3 or 4 years ago, he said, well, that's great, but how many people without degrees have you actually hired? And I was like, well, that's rude, but it has stuck with me. And I will say, we're still not doing a great job of that, right? So I put that out there very transparently because, it is challenging, and and I think we see in a lot of the data and surveys that our organizations have done that it's one thing, for the C-suite to say, I'm on board, but when you actually get down to the hiring managers and how you really drive change kind of at that level, I think is challenging. But also picking up on what Byron said, like why I really am excited about the opportunity you all have is that you are inherently starting with the fact that you are so deeply connected in your communities, right? So, and that's something that, a lot of times if you have a company like coming in and setting up shop, right, they have to kind of back map, right, their way back into the community, oftentimes like maybe not so successfully, right? So you're starting from a real position of strength in that regard. And I think really being able to lean in really to this kind of dual strategy that you have the opportunity to pursue, which is the ability to drive quality jobs and pathways for workers through your investment activity, but then also looking at yourselves as, how do you become, the employer of choice within a community, right? And that's really powerful to be thinking about kind of that dual approach. I like what Byron suggested about, no need to do this alone. So either thinking about how kind of to do it as an industry, so to speak, or also how to really join forces within the community and making sure that you are part of those strategic tables that are already in a lot of places being set. A lot of that might be driven through some of the federal investment that's coming down, through commerce or energy or transportation or others that's kind of generating new conversations in exciting ways about talent. So how can you kind of get into the right conversations and really be thinking about the ability to build pathways, to raise awareness, to really be providing opportunities in new ways.
Yeah. And just as one practical point, because JFF has so much to contribute here, reminds me, the Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign, this is a coalition right now of over 60 institutions, including, big talent platforms like Workday and LinkedIn and now Indeed and a lot of, as well as big companies, as well as most of the major workforce institutions nationally, including JFF. And if you go to tearthepaperceiling.org and just sign up as part of the movement, there's a lot of free resources available from many of these groups and tools, and including Opportunity Work, including JFF and many others. So if that's helpful for you to get started, definitely do it. That's the point. We don't know enough sitting up here about your actual talent needs or about your specific community, but you guys know a lot about both of those. So I just think that the payoff is huge, and I thinking about this reminds me of in healthcare, these days the disease burden is mainly chronic care. So actually having health navigators, coaches that are close to the community that can basically build a relationship and then use protocols that are coming from software, that ends up being the huge opportunity. So you may be working in a domain where actually it's not just that you can get equal skills, but you can get equal skills and you can get real insight and more efficacy. I was saying backstage that one of the discoveries of a healthcare company like this that was going there is that the very best occupation in their data of for success and this is for healthcare, has been bartenders, right? Bartenders. And they don't have degree requirements on any of these. Bartenders might have a degree, might not, but it's because it is the skill of being able to engage, to listen, to build relationships and help people solve problems is a hugely valuable skill. And the technical sort of aspects of that system can often be supported by software. And so some of the skills that the really resourceful people in community have are insanely valuable, and it's not understood how valuable they are. So whatever you can do to sort of bring that to light and give people the experience, whether they stay in there or whether they move on elsewhere into the workforce, it's a big deal. And all the jobs we have working on are quality jobs in the sense that Maria's talking about. We're looking for upward mobility, and there's no reason we shouldn't have much more of it in this country.
I've always felt that CDFIs are first-line economic responders. I think that there's so much, talk about how will AI influence the sector, the field, and the banking sector. What does it mean for the CDFI sector? this field, CDFIs are financial coaches. They may not be health promoters, health advocates, but they're financial advocates for the communities that they serve. And so I think as we look at how technology can continue, we can use automation to continue to improve operating efficiency, there is always going to be a need, I believe, in the CDFI space for the high-touch human capital side of this, and also the other talent and the skills you need to be able to leverage the technology. So it's really, the workforce is really diversified here. It's very interesting. And I like this idea of, we're not, again, just thinking about our own organizations, but also you influence many other employers. And so as part of that economic development ecosystem that you all work in, we have the opportunity to both make the work that we do and the impact exponentially even stronger. But that's exciting, and I'm optimistic. But we're also having this conversation in the midst of this unprecedented moment where there is a lot of fear and divisiveness and actual real legal challenges. And so I know that this was not necessarily the core focus of our panel, but I do think we should talk about what the recent legal cases, affirmative action, Harvard, we have in our space an impact fund, the Fearless Fund, that has recently been targeted. Talk to us a little bit about how these headwinds are shaping the workforce advocacy space, and just your thoughts.
Yeah, it is very top of mind for us, and I know like a lot of the organizations that we work with for sure, because I think we're at this moment where we believe that the equity gaps have never been clearer or more stark, that we're at a point where we really risk them being worsened, right, instead of lessened. But yet the political climate and the headwinds that we're facing seem to be intensifying, all the time. As Brandee mentioned, I used to work for the U.S. Department of Labor, and I worked there from the first Bush administration all through Clinton, and then most of the second Bush administration. And I will say, like, even in the political challenges of those days, issues of jobs and training and career pathways and employer engagement were really pretty bipartisan ideas, right? And so it was a pretty smooth sailing, I would say, for the large part for these issues in those times. And now it's very different. And I feel that even something as what you would think would be easy as yes, folks should have access to a quality job, can quickly become divisive. So we, just as our organization and our board, we're just thinking a lot all the time, very intentionally about, where do we really double down, right? How do we want to partner? How do we want to talk about these issues? And I would say in the moment, we're really doubling down on, we are not going to back away from our focus on equity. We're not going to back away on the language that we're using. And that without intentionality around strategy and the problems that we're trying to fix and calling that out, then we're never going to have the impact that we want to have as a field. So we have.
Yes.
And I would say, again, to be really transparent, 5-10 years ago, I think we would have been more nervous about it, right? We would have been, well, I don't know, and what if a funder gets upset, or, and I just think that, at least personally, I feel like we just can't be in that point anymore, that these issues are too important, that something like quality jobs should be a through line that can connect all of us together and not divide us.
Yeah. I think it can be. I've heard a lot of legal commentary on the two cases, but I'm not really qualified to make a legal opinion. I will say, though, that it's striking to me on the higher ed side how much the commentary assumes that higher education, and particularly selective higher education, is the main and only and critical path to upward mobility in the country. And to the extent that's true, well, that's a disaster. Not that college is a disaster, but the idea that when there are not nearly enough quality seats for everyone, the idea that the only way you can get a decent job is to go through some sort of selective college is a disaster for the country. It's guaranteeing, just by the math, that most people in the country will not have that opportunity. That can't be, and it doesn't have to be. If the only place you could learn was a college, that would be one thing, but that's not, as we saw at the beginning, like that's not the main place that people learn. We have it backwards. When we say you don't have like enough of like a pedigreed education in order to do the job, getting that first job, that is permission to learn and grow and work. And nobody, we could see in the data, stars, when they advance in jobs, it's a very close skills fit. Typically stars will move to jobs that they have overwhelmingly have the skills to do, whereas people, the more selective your college degree, the more you'll be brought into jobs that you don't know what to do, right? Like you're just given the chance to learn. So I just, we just kind of have the kind of cause and effect backwards. And I think we absolutely, like whatever happens in higher ed, we've got to commit that the tens of millions of people, the more than half of the workforce that doesn't have a college degree, is going to have the chance so that if they can do the job, they can get the job. If they learn valuable skills, they can earn more. And if the path they took made more people successful, that we put more funding and support behind that so other people can travel that same path. And I think it would be a much less central issue in the debate if we did that. So that I think is really important. And then I will say, Maria, I agree with you, good job should be common ground, and I think it can be. If you look at the range of states, for example, that have taken up this banner, it's a very wide ideological spectrum. And if you look at the kind of the level of support for this, we just launched, we announced today sort of a pre-launch of a public sector hub for this movement for STARS, a STARS public sector hub for those states and counties and cities and the rest that are adopting these practices, and to help them learn from each other, learn from the data, learn from best practices, and we'll have we pre-announced it so that more partners can join us in that work. But it's interesting. I mean, we have the comments there from the governor of New Jersey and the governor of Utah. It's very representative. So I believe that if you treat people with respect and you not just say, oh, we're gonna kind of give you something, we're gonna take a barrier away. No, we need your skills. We need your talent, your energy, your creativity, and that's across the board. Half of white workers are stars. Even if it's disproportionately Black and Latino, there's 3.3 million Asian American stars. This is an issue for the entire country. Veterans, rural, very disproportionate. So I hear all the time, I know what I can do, but no one will give me a chance. But I hear that from people of every race, and I hear it from urban and rural, and it's true. People have skills, and they're being held back. And when you look at a system that's producing such unequal results, the fundamental question, no matter what your ideology, how market, how government, whatever, is do you believe there's something wrong with the people, or do you believe there's something wrong with the system? I believe there's something wrong with the system, and anybody who believes that, whatever they think the answer is, I'm willing to work with.
Fantastic. Well, that same mindset and framework for how you're approaching your work is very similar to the community development and CDFI space. And yet, especially in this moment where there's a lack of high quality information and there is a lot of political divisiveness, I think it's more important than ever that we continue to bring our worlds closer together, both through policy and through our advocacy. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you feel that we are, I described us as like we're distant cousins.
Yeah, that's right.
We can hang out together at a holiday and, we have a good time, but we're not there together on a regular basis. So how do we bring these two sectors together so that both are shared experiences, but also, we can learn from one another, but we can also amplify our voice together?
Yep, absolutely. Do you want to start?
Well, I would say, to me, maybe the biggest opportunity to do that is in the context of the real surge of public and private investment that are hitting communities as a result of some of the recent legislation passed by Congress in infrastructure, in clean energy, in all sorts of environmental remediation, in semiconductors and supply chains, a bunch of the reshoring, like the millions of jobs, of skilled jobs that actually need to be created, many of them very location specific. If we take the same approach that we do very lazily now and say like, oh, this is what talent is, we literally cannot succeed. There's not enough talent to fill it. So the thing that makes me in a way optimistic is it's always been the right thing and it's always been a smart thing to fully include people, all the talents. But now, going forward, it's absolutely necessary thing. Like we will not achieve those goals if we don't do it. And so I believe that in that context, there's a wonderful opportunity for the industry to come together. I'll say on behalf of Opportunity at Work, to the extent that there's a cohort of CDFIs, we'd be happy to help. We'll share our data, we'll share our best practices, and we'll learn from you because and the deeper we can make this happen in communities, the more inclusion we can achieve and the more credibility. You have a hugely important role to play. And because I say work is solving problems. And so we need to know the problems. And I think one of the big things CDFIs do is kind of really get locally to the heart of like, what are the problems and what are potential solutions? And then to plug in talent, including lots of local talent. That seems like a wonderful opportunity to me, and certainly from Opportunity at Work standpoint, we'd be delighted to work with the industry on it.
Yeah, and I would say the same for Jobs for the Future. We would love to link arms and move forward together. I think there's an opportunity to think about things like, is there kind of a joint or kind of umbrella like policy agenda, right? That the CDFI space and the workforce space maybe go in together on. Like, how do we really leverage the fact that I think in a lot of ways, right, our funders, right, both either philanthropic or corporate or government, are also kind of distant cousins, right, of each other. So how can we kind of expand the tent and bring those conversations together with the folks who are funding our collective work? I also think that there's a great opportunity for CDFIs because good news is I feel you don't have to reinvent the wheel or start from scratch, right? There's a lot of great work that is being done like already in your communities, like possibly through your community college or your public workforce investment boards or community-based organizations that you can already kind of dig into and leverage in ways, and that's something that JFF would be happy to like help you kind of think through how to make those connections to things that are already happening. I think you have a great opportunity to reach back into your community schools, right? And how can you really set up CDFIs in a way where it could be a place for internships or work-based learning opportunities for young people as they're starting to like explore careers and what might be next for them, right? So I think there's a great opportunity there. And again, kind of what I mentioned before, really, looking at your power and kind of your position in the community as both that investment function and as a community-based employer. And I know that the Aspen Institute and Pacific Community Ventures are doing some great work with a number of you kind of around kind of linking the investment work directly to quality jobs and good jobs strategies. So I think there's a way to kind of bring that to bear more front and center as well.
Maybe it really is CDFI's moment in this field, because as I think about the way you need to solve the problems in the ecosystem, not just for an individual employer, it's incredibly important to have, and our data shows like the mix of sort of big business and small business, for example, incredibly important in how people kind of actually move through the labor market with mobility. The role of government is incredibly important, but then it goes out into the market. It's a collective action problem, but it's also a market problem. And so to have institutions that have a market orientation, right, that need to do the math every day, but who also have a community orientation to like, what's the real problem we're trying to solve collectively, and who can bring what to the table, that is actually the way this part of the workforce work needs to get done, because workforce can't exist in a silo, because what's the work for? Like what projects, what initiatives, what community needs, right? What market needs. So I just think my understanding of what the CDFI community has to offer, I think you should not settle for just participating in this. I think you should be like truly leading, because if you're not truly leading, how do then I think the odds that we really get this movement to penetrate fully throughout American communities are a lot less. I think we need you.
Well, I love that call to action, and I will also say that I do think that funders have a role and an opportunity to play in this to also help break down these silos and pull some of these efforts together, and not also fund with these very clear like walls, like, oh no, we do this, but we don't do that. So because I brought up the incredible headwinds that are happening in the world around us, I want to make sure though that we end on a positive note here. So whether it's from the public sector, the private sector, the social entrepreneurship sector, what's something that you're super excited about?
For me, what I'm most excited about, and what I believe, the reason I believe we'll be successful, if we have a world in 10 years, like Maria, like your goals, that what we want, like in the labor market, certainly, all of us here will contribute less than 2% of the total solution. And the reason I say that is because STARS workers in general, but STARS in particular, they're out there right now. They're working, they're learning, they're figuring things out, they're trying to get through, like, can I get, under the fence, over the fence, et cetera. There's just all of this incredible energy, skill, talent. And so much of what we need to do to start, not to finish, but to start, is to get things out of their way. Like, STARS are showing up every day for us, for industry, for this country, for communities. We need to show up for them. And actually, I believe that like a little bit of moving stuff out of their way will actually go a surprisingly long way. You'll be really surprised when you say, please, we know you're out there, we want you to work with us. You'll be amazed at the results. So I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah. Good. I think the two things that excite me, one is that I truly do feel we're at a moment of great opportunity, right? I think we're at a moment where corporate leaders are thinking about talent issues and jobs in new ways. I think we have a moment here in DC with new levels of funding flowing to communities to focus on workforce that we can really leverage in this moment. And then the fact that I do feel that Gen Z isn't gonna put up with the status quo, right? So we have a whole pipeline of young people coming behind us, and I think the onus is on all of us, of leaders of older generations, to really build that path for them, and what role can we play as leaders in making sure that we see the impact that we want to see.
I'm gonna just really highlight this, not stand for the status quo. And just say, this is this room that you're in, the table that we're sitting at today, this is a whole community that doesn't stand for the status quo. So really happy that we had a chance to talk with you. We want to spend more time with you. We don't just want to see you on Thanksgiving. So we will be back. And thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. That's good.